But Luke, what I'd like to talk about is the power of the data. We could not dig into this. Well, we did. I mean, we dug into it with Excel spreadsheets. I mean, it took hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours to really dig into this data. And it's easy to dig into 1 year data. But the real value and the value that H data brings is our ability to look at this trend. If we just looked at 2021, we could have accepted this ratio as just that's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. But our ability to go back in time and to look at that data back 10 years, this really told us the story that we were looking for, the values in the trend. And we looked at the same ratio of that non-return based spend, that 60% ratio. We looked at that over time, and I'll be honest, over time, over the last decade, that amount has come down. It's come down from about 75% to just under 60%, and it's come down on the back of lower fuel and purchase power primarily. T&D O&M's been moving up. Expect that to continue to move up. But so that ratio of non-return based spend has come down, and our concern here and our focus on transformative transition is that's about to change. That non-return based spend that's declined on the back of fuel and purchase power, that is going to change in 22. And as the year comes to a close in 22 and FERC drops their Form 1 data, I think the data is going to play itself out. And so, Luke, I'd love to get your perspective on this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Rogers. And I definitely kind of, when we were working on this analysis, yeah, when you showed me that spreadsheet here, if you're one of our current customers, this is probably a very familiar aspect of like you have this massive spreadsheet that you're having to manage, and then you're only getting snapshots of data. But the thing that we're trying to provide here is that trend, as you're talking about, being able to see all the data within context without the silo of a single year's worth of data. So, Drew, if you don't mind bringing up my deck here. So I just picked a couple companies here, which, I don't want to call out any particular company, so of course I anonymized it a bit. But we're looking at the top. I picked a few different companies, the top 10 utilities by 21 operating revenue. So these are the 10 largest utilities by operating revenue in the United States. And we're looking at particular items here as a proportion of operating revenue. So as we're looking at this trend here, we're going between 2010, 2021. And as we can see with this company here, they're above 60% of their operating revenue proportion was being assigned to non-return expenses. So we can easily see here the kind of in this lime green piece of the bar here, that is fuel as a percent of operating revenue. So as we're seeing kind of this crunch down on fuel proportionally to operating revenue, and their purchase power has been fairly stable, but when we're seeing increases in, say, T&D, actually, I did want to bring a question for you, Rogers, maybe a little bit after this, is how can we kind of take the analysis or the lens that you're presenting here within your research and apply it to specifically transmission? Because I know the FERC has been heavily focused on transmission development, especially in the near future, with their notice of proposed rulemaking that they released last year. And then also, if you guys haven't seen the article that Rogers and his team made, you can go on the Alvarez and Marsal website, look up transition, that report there. And the second point you kind of put in that research there is sourcing capital to fund increasing infrastructure investments. Especially, you're going to have to be creative in how you're sourcing that capital. So as we're seeing increases in the T&D O&M and that non-return aspect of it, how are companies going to try to keep that low relative to their operating revenue while also still trying to increase investment within transmission, increase investment in distribution, of course, getting the OPEX out of it as they build this out and actually starts being used and useful for the ratepayers. So we're seeing this an example of one company. If we go to a second company, we're seeing a very similar story, a crunch on the fuel as a percent of operating revenue, purchase power being fairly stable. At least in this case, they actually saw an increase in purchase power, but they're still keeping it below 60% of operating revenue. So I'll kind of turn it back to you, Rogers, and maybe you can hit on those couple points I was asking about with the transmission as well as capital investment.